Elon Musk, Mark Zuckerberg, Bill Gates, what do they all have in common? Aside from their companies originally being from the Silicon Valley and stealing all your data, they are super nerds with autistic traits, with Elon Musk being the cheerleader, publicly confirming that he has autism.
I'm actually making history tonight as the first person with Asperger's to host SNL.
Not only that, but autism rates in the Silicon Valley are skyrocketing, with more than double the kids being diagnosed with autism in the area compared to the national average. Just why is Silicon Valley so autistic? Hi, I'm Dr. Shuin, a genetics doctor who helps people live longer and healthier. In this video, we'll break down the science behind why autism is increasing in the Silicon Valley. There are a lot of myths about autism, but as a doctor who diagnoses genetic forms of autism like Fragile X, and Cornelia DeLange, I'm here to separate fact from fiction. So why is autism so high in Silicon Valley? Is it something in the air, some kind of vaccine side effect, or is it some deeper reason? After looking through the research, I've narrowed it down to 3 major reasons as to why autism rates are increasing in the Silicon Valley. Let's dive in. Before we go into the reasons, let's quickly explain what autism is. Autism, or autism spectrum disorder, is a difference in how the brain processes information. It may affect how people interact, communicate, and experience the world. It's called a spectrum because people can range from very severe disability, where they're not speaking, they're showing intellectual impairments and repetitive behaviors, to very mild or high-functioning autism, like Asperger's, where individuals have normal or high above average intelligence but struggle with social interactions, like Elon Musk, Mark Zuckerberg. Some people with autism have such amazing skills that they appear to be superhuman. For example, some autistic individuals are able to play a musical instrument from memory any tune that they hear just once, like Cody Lee, the winner of America's Got Talent. Others are able to instantly know or calculate day of any given date, something called calendar calculation. And others just possess insane memory, like reciting pi to 22,514 digits and the ability to speak 10 different languages, like Daniel Tammet. These individuals are called savants and represent just 1% of those with high-functioning autism. Autism diagnoses have increased over time, partly because in 1994, milder cases previously known as Asperger's syndrome were included under the broader umbrella term autism spectrum disorder. But this alone doesn't explain why autism is rising so fast in the Silicon Valley. Okay, with that out of the way, let's get into the 3 major reasons why autism is rising so rapidly in the Silicon Valley. The first reason is that the tech industry naturally selects for people with autistic traits. Why is that? Well, imagine a workplace where you don't need to make small talk, you don't have to understand office politics, you could just hyper-focus on solving problems all day. Well, for some people this might be a prison, but for autistic people, this sounds like a dream. And that's exactly what the tech industry offers. For example, here's a generic job posting for an AI research scientist at Meta. As you can see, you need deep experience in coding, strong analytical skills, and the utmost ability to focus on long, tedious tasks like debugging code. Autistic people possess some of the most talented brains with extreme attention to detail. For example, studies show that they have incredibly low error rates when coding. Conversely, their communication and emotional intelligence may not be as refined, but in the Silicon Valley, those qualities aren't as prioritized. For instance, it's perfectly acceptable to text message somebody sitting right across from your desk rather than talk to them. These qualities are being recognized as advantageous in the tech sector and are actively being sought after. In fact, studies from Auticon, a company that exclusively hires autistic individuals, have found that the neurodiverse group represents 3% of the tech industry, 3 times higher than the average. Large tech companies like IBM, Microsoft actually have special hiring programs targeted towards people on the spectrum, because they might otherwise struggle during the interview process. What this leads to is an army of neurodiverse and hardworking engineers in Silicon Valley, all trying to solve the world's toughest problems. Places like Facebook, Google, Tesla, and are all attracting top talent from around the world. A meta research scientist in AI can earn up to $550,000. Average salaries from FANG companies in 2022 were almost $100,000 higher than the average, with Netflix paying a whopping $450,000. Oh my goodness, I see where my subscription money is going to, though it makes me wonder, what problem is Netflix trying to solve anyway with all that money? So overall, because the job requirements match autistic people's strengths so well, and because the compensation is so attractive, it's no wonder the best autistic minds are flocking to the area, increasing the average autism rates. This phenomenon is not unique to this region. It's also happening in other AI tech centers like the Toronto Waterloo Corridor, Shenzhen, and Tel Aviv, where governments are pouring billions into AI infrastructure and technology. Now that we know why autistic individuals are attracted to the Silicon Valley, let's talk about why autism is increasing over time. First, we have to understand that autism is highly heritable, meaning it is primarily a genetic condition. Studies show that identical twins have an 80 to 90% concordance rate, meaning 80 to 90% of the time, both twins will have autism. However, in fraternal twins, the concordance rate is only 30 to 40%. When one parent has autism, the chance of having an autistic child is about 10% compared to 1 to 2% in the general population. However, if both parents have autistic traits, the chance jumps to 30 to 50%. So you can think of it as like risk factors that you've inherited from your parents, each gene contributing a small percentage of that risk. And you're just inheriting a random set of genes from each parent. After a certain threshold, you may be diagnosed with autism. And just having parents who both have autism, that risk goes up. But it doesn't necessarily mean that the child's autism will be more severe. It's just that the chances are greater. Now that we understand that autism is largely a genetic condition, let's try to understand why autism rates might be increasing. With an ever larger gene pool of people with autism all migrating to the Silicon Valley, autism rates are soaring because of something called assortative mating. There are two types of assortative mating: positive and negative. Positive assortative mating means like attracts like, and negative assortative mating means opposites attract, like in an introvert marrying an extrovert. But in the case of autism, autistic individuals tend to marry partners who are also on the spectrum. Why might this be? In Silicon Valley, where the workforce is filled with highly analytical, hyper-focused, systemizing thinkers, so people who like to study objects and figure out how they work, rather than as opposed to empathizing, which is understanding how people feel, the chances of meeting someone who is also autistic is quite high. And it's just because of the geographic location, because they're all concentrated in a small area. And this is known as social homogamy. However, there's also evidence that autistic people just tend to seek out autistic partners because they get along better. Whether it is due to a social environment or because autistic individuals prefer to marry other autistic individuals isn't clear, but we do know a fact that a sort of mating is taking place because the genetics of parents of an autistic child are statistically more similar than by chance. Since autism is highly heritable and autistic people tend to prefer marry other autistic people, the chances of having an autistic child is thus increased. Basically, autism begets more autism. This is a huge factor in why autism is increasing in the Silicon Valley. But there's one last major factor that is driving autism through the roof. And that third reason is a combination of environmental and social factors. Let me explain. Many professionals in the Silicon Valley delay having children to focus on their careers. In fact, California ranks among the highest for both men and women for marrying later in life, with an average marriage age of 31.2. Now, how does this actually increase autism? Studies show that older parental age, especially fathers over 40, something in medicine called advanced paternal age, increases the risk of autism. This is because as men age, their sperm are continuously being produced, and with each cell division, DNA mistakes are created, and this is called de novo mutations. For men who have children over 40s, the risk of autism for their child triples from 1 to 3%. For women over 35, the risk is increased by 30%, not nearly as high as for men, but still increased to about a 2.3% risk in absolute terms. In short, the older the parents are, the greater the risk of autism for their child. And in the Silicon Valley, because of work pressures, higher education, and career ambitions, parents are having children later than average. However, this increase only accounts for a small fraction of the rise of autism. An even bigger reason comes from the increasing pollution in our environment. Pollution such as PM 2.5, heavy metals, microplastics, and processed foods have all been linked to autism. Although overall, the trend in air quality has been improving due to stricter regulation and electric cars, the worsening forest fires in the area have reversed those trends. Come on, we all saw how bad those LA wildfires were. Pesticides and herbicides are also linked with autism, and they have been increasing year over year in California, where it is home to some of the best fruits and vegetables. And this will naturally increase the amount of pesticide residue on our foods. The use of pesticides has gone so bad that residents in many Californian cities have evidence of pesticides present in their air samples. They're literally inhaling this stuff. In addition, the soil of Silicon Valley is contaminated by hazardous waste, where they are home to more Superfund sites than any other county in the United States. Many of these sites originated during the semiconductor boom during the 1960s to the 1980s, where companies just irresponsibly dumped chemicals like trichloroethylene into the soil. And this led to soil and groundwater contamination. Exposure to trichloroethylene has been linked to cancer, neurodegenerative disease, and there's some evidence that it's linked to autism as well. Just living near a Superfund site has been shown to be associated with an increased risk of autism. Autism isn't just increasing because of genetic and environmental factors, though. It's also because of social factors. Because autism is increasing overall in the area, there is an increased awareness and more funding is put towards diagnosis and support, especially in a wealthy and technologically advanced place like the Silicon Valley. This leads to earlier diagnostic rates, earlier intervention, and improved outcome for children with autism. For example, the median age of autism diagnosis in the Silicon Valley is just 36 months, compared to 49 months for the rest of the United States. And finally, I know there's a bunch of you out there asking this question, but vaccines do not cause autism, but I'll save this for another video. So now, if you're ever wondering why it seems like every tech founder from the Silicon Valley is just a little bit quirky, it's because of an increased autistic gene pool, increasing pollution, and increased social awareness. Hope you enjoyed today's video and found it helpful. You can click here to watch me drive fast for 7 days and learn about those benefits, or here for a video that YouTube thinks you'll love. Please subscribe and like, so remember to stay healthy, live long, and prosper. Bye for now.